Okay, so we are at start time, so I'm going to start it. If we have people pop in later on, I will let them in midstream, so to speak. So, everyone, this is just going to be a nice, casual Saturday morning at GaryCon 13. Okay, we're going to keep it nice, sweet, mellow. It's Saturday after all. I got a little bit of coffee left over right here. We're just going to chill. I'm going to paint Mr. Gary Gygax himself. This is through Bear's Head Miniatures. I gave you a link in the email invite this morning. They're sold out right now, but they had stock earlier this week, so I think they do periodically refresh them. Um, so that's where you can find him. And I'm going to paint him inspired off the Gary we know. Obviously, he's got to have a Hawaiian shirt. We're going to have him with a DMG in his hand. I'm not going to use decals. It's just not my style for this type of thing that we're doing today. Jeans, red sneakers. I think I'm going to do him in a red Hawaiian shirt with white flowers. And that's it. I'm just going to do it. It'll probably take us about 2.5 hours to complete, something like that. This is a hangout. This is like I'm sitting at the bar. That's really early in the morning to be sitting at the bar, but you get the idea. And you could just walk up, sit down at the table with me, just chat. We could talk about absolutely anything. We could talk about the hobby that we absolutely love, any type of role playing, how we got into it. But also, if you have any questions on the materials that I'm using, the paints that I'm using, the process that I'm about to go through, just let me know. Just speak up. This is not a muted channel, okay? Just ask questions as we go. And I will let you know too. I'm going to talk for the entire time, and I'm going to let you know the paints that I'm using, the brushes that I use, why I use them, and so on and so forth. At the end, when he's done, we're going to do a random drawing. We will list off the names of the participants in the channel, and however many that is, we'll do it 1D that. And I'll probably pull up like Google or something like that and have Google do the roll on screen for us, and that will be the winner. If you win this, I will obviously need a shipping address. If you're uncomfortable with that, if you don't want the miniature at the end, that's totally chill. We can roll until someone does get it. So that's the format of today's show. I hope you have fun with it. Feel free to kick back, drink coffee, and ask questions as we go, and we can just talk about anything that we absolutely love. So to start, by the way, real quick, I'm going to use a brush set called Artist Opus. That's these guys right here. I really like them. I do know painters that don't, but they work for me. They're natural sable fiber. I think they're very high quality. You do pay a little bit more for them, but if you keep them in good shape, they'll just last forever. So they're worth it. I'm not going to use any super fine ones, even for Gary's pupils in his eyes or painting the DMG. I find that with this set here, there'll probably be 2 or 3 that we use almost for the full duration of the painting on this. There are some other brushes that I use as well, and there are some actually really cheap brushes you can get that are actually pretty good quality, but these are the ones I'm using today. I'm going to be using a technique that uses washes. I paint a lighter version all over. I gave him a basic foundation, so blue jeans, red Hawaiian shirt, and then I'm going to wash over the top of it, which is going to mute the colors a little bit. It's going to darken them, and it's going to create shadows in the crevices, and then I'm going to highlight on top of that. I'm not using the technique that is gaining popularity nowadays, where I have primed him in black and then sprayed him from above in white. We won't need it for a miniature that is standing like this, and with the wash technique that I'll be using. So I've primed him in white. My choice of white is because I want nice bright colors. If we were painting something where we wanted darker colors, more somber of a piece, then paint him in black first. If you want a mid range of that, a balance of that, then obviously you could do grey. I've done grey a few times. I rarely do black. White tends to be my go-to, only because I like the brighter pieces. So I'm just going to jump into this again. Feel free just to, unmute and chat anytime at all. If you've got questions or just want to make an observation of some description. Otherwise, I am going to get the base coat on him. And we're going to start with blue jeans, red sneakers, and a red top. I normally, by the way, do I normally do a darker blue top. There's a photo of Gary at a convention, and he's got this almost Prussian blue Hawaiian shirt with green, yellow flowers on it. And of the Garys that I've painted so far, they've all had that. But I thought for today's stream, we could do something a little bit different. And we're going to go a little bit brighter, but we're going to go red. I did a quick Google search for Hawaiian shirts, found a pretty snazzy red one. I was like, you know what? That'd be nice. That'd be a nice variant to what we normally do. Give him a red shirt this time around. Now my process here is a little bit like, actually, my map colouring that I do. If you've ever watched me on YouTube or Twitch when I'm colouring my maps, I tend to start off with a very basic colour, just, you know, it's like if I'm painting green, then I'll do a green colour. But then I start layering up the highlights and the lowlights, as I like to call it. And we're going to do a similar technique with Gary here. Now sometimes when I'm highlighting, it's, you know, I'll end up like doing like the base, a wash, the shadows, the highlights, the super highlights, and end up with something like 5. We're going to get away with 3 today, without a doubt. Different ways of doing what I'm doing right now, by the way. You could paint a whole shirt a darker red, and then start to bring up lighter and lighter reds. And you could do that just with different shades of actual red paint. That would be valid. It just that could take a while, because if you think about it, you've got to get your little crevices, and then you've got to kind of like get to the edge of the crevice and paint a slightly lighter red, then the tip of the crevice and paint a slightly lighter red. Totally doable way of going about it, but it is a little trickier. The alternative, of course, is you could go light all over and then actually start painting in the crevices. With darker shades, I find that to be harder. If I was going to do anything other than the wash technique that we're going to do today, I would probably do the darker route and then build up. You could also do like a mid-tone, red, and then paint in shadows, and then paint on highlights. But that on something like sneakers or something, that's going to be time-consuming. Let's just call it that. All right, let's give him his blue jeans now.
So for the sculpt itself, did they pull a photo of Gary in this pose?
I actually don't know. I don't know the history of this piece at all. In fact, if you search for Gary Gygax miniature, there's another one that's out there, also out of stock. I don't know how many of these are licensed, by the way. But Bear's Head seems to be the stock staple, so I suspect that it was licensed. So I don't know if they pulled a photo or how they, like, you know, the origin of this sculpt, like, at all. The other sculpt that's out there, and I don't know the name of the company, they actually have a slightly more dynamic pose, which I actually prefer over this one. But again, it's completely out of stock. I don't know the history behind any of them. I might actually ask Luke the next time that I have an opportunity. I might sort of say, you know, hey, are these things licensed? You know, what is the family behind these in any way? It's funny that when I post pictures of these online, even in the unpainted format, everyone wants to know where you get them from. And I often wonder if Bear's Head Miniatures is like, we just sold out again? Like, what's going on? Oh yeah, it's GaryCon going on. Pex, you don't paint, right? Or do you?
No, but I go to actually quite a couple of miniature specific cons every year. Ironically, I tried paint. I lied. I tried painting when I was a teenager. And then I discovered I had very shaky hands, and this was foolish for me to try. Um, so I gave up on it. I think I bought a lot of Lord of the Rings miniature line from Games Workshop, and I painted most everything I bought, but it looked like crap, to be honest. Um, yeah, I just couldn't get my hands to steady doing the detailed work, and they just shake on me,
Mm.
which was a shame because I really wanted to get into it, but apparently my body said no. But yeah, I go to ReaperCon and a few other cons that are specifically miniature related. I love the miniature community. Those guys are pretty fantastic. And I've been watching one of our fellow streamers, Midwest Miniature Guy as well. He does some amazing stuff.
Yeah, the strength of Midwest is he has good color combination choices. Like the really good contrasting and complementary colors. That I think is one of his great strengths. Like sometimes I've actually got a couple of his painted miniatures, and sometimes I look at them and I go, "How did you even come up with this decision to do these colors?" That's my weakness myself.
Nice. I got bamboozled recently. There was a miniature tower I bought. It was fully painted, and it came fully painted, yes, but the colors were way lighter than what was displayed and shilled online. I was very disappointed because it
Oh,
was not as vibrant as what they were selling. I emailed them and they told me well, it was all the lighting. I'm like, fine. I don't got time for this. Bye.
yeah.
But it's a gorgeous piece, yeah. But yeah,
What was it?
it was a cathedral church. You roll from there's a little hole on the top of the church tower, and it rolls down a flight of stairs. That's a spiral staircase out into the courtyard of the church, and it has a little basket to stop it from rolling out of it. It was really cool. They do a lot of other cool ones I was gonna get, but I'm not now. Because of the shoddy paint job that they did. They had a vampire castle. They had a mushroom kind of village thing. They had a regular castle, and they had like a dragon's lair. Some really cool stuff that I would buy, but unless I learned to paint or I paid somebody to paint it after the fact, because they do sell non-painted versions, I don't think I'd buy from that company again.
Mm.
Which is sad because I like what they had.
So they're all dice towers?
They're all dice towers and all 3D printed as well. They come in. It's actually 3 different pieces. It has to do with the height of the 3D printer itself. It can only print high, so they have these little pegs that it slots into, and the bottom part has the sockets that you insert it into, and it's 3 different pieces. But it holds up pretty well at the table, despite it being it can be disassembled fairly easily.
So
I could
do you like
take it.
collecting dice towers or something?
Yeah, I do. I
Okay.
like my dice towers.
Okay. Honestly, I don't think I've ever encountered anyone that has multiple dice towers.
Yeah, they're pretty. I like them.
Okay. You're gonna have to send me a link to them. I need to see these things. Most dice towers for me don't do it for me. You know, I think I bought one from. Honestly, I think it must have been TotalCon 2020 because TotalCon happened just before the pandemic hit. And I remember getting it in person, and I got it only because it was Call of Cthulhu, so I had to. But otherwise, most dice towers are kind of just too boxy for me, if that makes sense. Like, too square, just too unimaginative. So what you're describing sounds really interesting.
Yeah, I'll shoot you the link on Discord as soon as I find it here again. I may change my mind and just settle on finding a painter to do it for me. Because I do like them a lot. Is this the guy? No. Maybe. Oh yeah, there is a bot feature on this site, so I could do that.
Alright, got his flesh done. If we give him some hair, we'll paint the DMG a base black. Then we're going to start with the actual detail work. We're going to start with the shadows all over him first. And this guy will start coming to life. Yeah, let's do his hair. I never had the good fortune of meeting Gary in real life, but from photos, this age period, he seemed like he had a little bit of grey hair going on, so that's what I'm going to give him. Giving a little widow's peak there. That will get a lot more defined when we add the highlights and the lowlights.
So what kind of paints are you using? Like, what's the base?
That's a really good question. So I am using right now these colors, these paints by Scale 75. Scale 75 is they do a miniature line of 75mm miniatures, but they did a Kickstarter a couple of years ago, and they sell them on their site now, where they actually came up with like almost a briefcase of a foam insert collection of these thick paints that you water down to the viscosity that you want. They're rich in pigments, and I really like it from that point of view. Their reds go on really well, their yellows go on really well, and most manufacturers, that's not the case. So that's what I'm using for the majority of today. The flesh I'm using here, though, are Reaper paints. Reaper is probably my second choice for most colours. And then the washes I'm actually going to be using Game Colour washes. My preferred washes are actually Games Workshop, but they're really expensive and I hate their freaking pots. So I use Game Colour washes. And I think that's it that we're doing today. I do have an Army Painter, some Army Painter washes for the darker tones. But otherwise, it's Scale 75 and Reaper for these. Do you guys have any preferred paints that you like?
Well, when I actually first started painting, I think Testers was about all you could find.
Yeah.
Yeah. So.
You know, this grey, actually, that I'm using here, I have plenty of greys, but, you know, I actually started miniature painting using bottles like this from a local hobby store. Now, I think most professional painters out there would probably, like, be falling out of their seats right now, but I'm just going to admit it on camera. Like, because these are cheap. You know, you get them from Michael's or whatever, you know, preferred store you have. They're big pots, they last forever, they're pretty thick, so you can water them down to the viscosity you like again. And I got good results with these, and like no complaints at all. And I'm actually using a grey right now out of one of those. They're very, very cost effective. Because it's almost like, you know, a lot of the time people sort of ask me, like, you know, well, how do I get started on this? And it's a fairly expensive hobby to get into. And I think that can be dissuading to a lot of folks. It's like this brush that I'm using right here might be $20 just for the brush, and no one wants to pay that. So it's like, what other alternatives have we got? Well, you know, the beautiful thing is there are actually some cost-effective choices. There's a pack of bushes that I have somewhere around here. Apparently, I've hidden it. I'll find it here shortly. They're called one bushes, and they're like from China or something. And there's like 50 of them in the pot, and it was like $20 off Amazon. And there's a guy at Reaper that put me onto them because he does painting seminars at Reaper, and he hands out those brushes. And when he gets them back, the tips are still perfect, and they've been abused. Dirt cheap, good tip. And it's like, all right. So if you were gonna like get into painting to start with, I would recommend a cheap brush like that, cheap paints like the pot that I showed you from Michael's, and just go from there, you know. And then if you're not into it, if it doesn't work, that's fine. You haven't really lost that much. If you do like it, over time you can just start upgrading some of your gear.
Yeah, I remember at the hobby shop they just had Warhammer and Warhammer 40K stuff. And I just couldn't afford it, to be honest. When I was younger, it was very, very pricey. I didn't know there was other things out there at the time though, or I would have probably tried it a lot sooner. But then I would have discovered I had shaky hands earlier too, so would have been a fool's errand.
But it also would have cost you less, right?
True, yeah.
To get to that conclusion.
Yeah, because I think the Lord of the Ring models that I were buying were one half as expensive or less than anything Warhammer related.
After I did the Michaels route, and I figured that, you know, I was actually enjoying the painting process. I bought so many of those paints too. They lasted me a long time. I started upgrade, and I went all in with like a Games Workshop, you know, boxed set. Like, yeah, I'm talking about expensive. I don't buy Games Workshop anymore. The price value I don't think is there, and I hate their pots. I really do.
Do they just not line up, or is it hard to paint?
It's like this thing.
Mm.
So you get this, and I think what you're meant to do is kind of pop it back, and then in theory, you've got like this little shelf here that you could sort of dab paint off. This is a wash, but you could dab paint off this. But like getting in and stirring it up and like just using it, it just gets messy, and in the neck here, paint starts to accumulate and stuff where it's like been dribbling down, and it starts to get crusty, and you know, it just, I don't know. Outside of the washes, I've not bought Games Workshop for a while. Not that I want to knock them. I don't know. I'll pay more if I feel like I'm getting better value or like a really good quality, and I just don't get it with them. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to paint the book completely in black, and then we'll come back through on the pages and we'll obviously paint them in white. Let's just give it a base coat all over here. Now we will be painting, I think it's a second edition DMG. Is it second edition? It might be first edition. But we'll be painting the DMG on here, the one with the red demon on it.
That's first.
First, thank you. When I said second, I was like, no, wait, the second one is different. That's the one with the actual DMG, the Dungeon Master at the gate, isn't it?
It depends on the version, I think. Mine has a dragon on it.
You know, I had a similar conversation in yesterday's painting session. And someone had like a limited edition, and then someone else had like the re-release or something that they did recently. I didn't even know they did one. And it got into this whole discussion of cover designs and whether it should be gold leaf instead of white pages and stuff. I'm like, you know what, I'm just doing first edition here. So, fun fact about this, by the way, I don't know if anyone in the channel right now has seen the diorama that I did about a year or so ago. And it was Gary next to a gaming table. There's 4 people sitting at the gaming table. And we've got dice bags, Mountain Dew. You know, he's holding the DMG, but there's a monster manual in front of him. One of the players has a player's handbook. And I've got a DM screen. And I've got a game on the table, which was actually the map from Tomb of Horrors, because I think you've got to, right? The amount of people that pointed out that I actually got the wrong DM screen for the wrong period was kind of staggering. And I find it funny, but I also almost nerding out. Like, normally I call it rivet counting. I'm like, really? Really? You're going to rivet count that? Well, what about the paint job? But I'm like, I was sitting there going, you know what? Kudos to you for actually being able to see. I've got a second edition screen with a first edition book. I'm like, okay. Getting my editions all mixed up.
Toss the link to the diorama in the chat there for folks that are interested.
Hey, thank you, Jan.
You're welcome.
I'm going to do one more of those. I'm actually going to do one for GaryCon next year, because I think GaryCon next year is obviously going to be physical. I'm going to do one more diorama. Never again am I going to paint Gary or a diorama. I'm going to do a bigger diorama, I think. I'm going to put it into auction. Alright, so we've got all of his base colours on. While we were painting, you know, one set of colours like the book, his jeans and his shirt have obviously dried. So now I'm going to go on to the next stage, and like I said earlier on, I'm doing a wash technique with this, where I'm going to apply a wash, or I've done brighter colours because the wash is going to mute them, it's going to knock them back a shade. But the wash in and of itself is going to start creating its own shadows, and conversely some of its own highlights. We can then come through with the same colour that we've just painted and tip real highlights, you know, the riches of creases and that type of thing. But let's start with the actual washes themselves. I'm going to start with his jeans, and I'm going to do a blue wash. This is by Game Colour. Washes aren't the same, by the way, it's just taking an acrylic paint and watering it down. The washes have a tendency to fall into the cracks. They have a good flow agent in them. If you actually just get paint and you water it, the paint will, sure, sit in the cracks, but it will also sit on top of the ridges a little bit more. The pigments will sit there. So I tend to actually use specific washes. I experimented with just watering down colours, and it just doesn't work the same. There's also a technique, by the way, called dipping. Where you could take, like, I'm going to call it like the equivalent of a black wash, and they come in very large cans, and at this point just dip the miniature into it, pull it out, and the theory is the dip will just sit in the crevices, but not on the ridges. And voila, you're done. Wargamers tend to use it a lot when they're doing mass units. I've tried dipping once. I dipped it, I pulled it out, the whole miniature was black. I was like, okay, well that's my experiment with dipping done. Not doing that anymore. And I think I gave my can away. Now this is where you're going to start to see a little bit of a transformation. I'm fairly liberal with the wash, and I'm purposely kind of stroking it against the grain so it catches on the ridges. And even though we're still wet, you can see that it's changed that base color that we put on, but you can also see it running into the ridges and the low-lying areas. If you get a little bit too much on, you can just use the brush to sort of soak it up. This works really well on armor too, by the way. Like paint your base armor silver or like a nice gunmetal if it's dimmer armor. And then wash the whole darn thing in black, like a strong tone. It will run into the crevices of chainmail really, really well. And obviously on plate, but you get a slightly better result than dry brushing, I think, because it actually part of it just slightly sits on top of your ridges and such, and it starts to create some shadows and sort of dims off the armor a little bit in areas where it should be, and you just get something a little bit deeper in quality that I think than straight dry brushing it. I wouldn't recommend it for like a showpiece or something like that, but for like tabletop play, it works out really, really well. Let's just get a little bit more in his bum area where there'll be some shadows. Alright, so this is my blue now on Gary. I think we'll let that dry. And we can move on to his shirt. I'm going to do the same treatment with his shirt. Same treatment with his skin. And at that point, this will actually start to dry. It only takes a few minutes to dry. It's not too bad at all. And then we can actually start coming back through and doing some of the detailing. Now, one thing that I got out of a Reaper seminar a couple of years ago is using colors and textures that have a little bit of contrast to them. So this is one reason why I'm going to do a red shirt versus the blue pants. We've got a nice black book over here, so I'm not giving him a black shirt as well. You've got this visual contrast between the two. Okay, so the shirt, we want our red wash. So we've done our blue. Where's my red? Flesh. There it is, there it is. Painting highlights or lowlights on this right now, totally permissible. Pex, you mentioned Midwest early on. That's what Midwest would be doing right now. I like this approach as the basis because the actual shadowing that you're getting is more gradual, you know? It's less black and white. It's less stark. Like if you look at Midwest's, while he does really good painting, you'll see that his highlights are just a brighter version of the base color. And there's actually quite a jump between the two. So if you were going to do that technique, my recommendation would be at least pick 5 or 7 variations of color change rather than 1 or 2, just to make it a little bit more gradual. Because shadows are gradual. They don't jump on a piece of cloth from light to dark. Now we got a little bit of the book there because that crevice in the book was a little bit still wet, but that's okay. Now the red wash here is, I want to say, a little subtle. And if I feel like I'm not getting the depth of shadows I want when it's all dry, I'll probably come in with a medium dark tone and purposely pick out some shadow areas, and I'll add that as well. But when we consider that this shirt is actually going to have flowers drawn all over it, white flowers, I think this will work out just fine. When it's all dry, I think that will be... It's almost... It's got a little bit of a sort of a texture going on to it. Now, this is, of course, still wet right here, but I think you can start to see where the shadows are beginning to form on it. So while that is drying, let's move on to his flesh. Normally, I'd have a little bit of an assembly line. I'd be working on a couple of miniatures at a time. So, you know, I would put him to one side now and let these washes dry. But you could see from his jeans, it's already set, so to speak. So it doesn't take long. It's literally just a couple of minutes. And I think that looks very jean-like already. And that was just blue with a wash. So, flesh. There is a flesh wash that you can get. Also game color. But also brown works just fine. I'm going to try the flesh wash today with this. I did the brown yesterday. But let's see what results we can get out of the flesh one. I want this miniature to be different than the one I did yesterday. So if you win him, you're getting something unique. Alright, similar principle. I'm going to go against the grain and paint this on. I don't want it to be too thick, but at the same time I want to make sure that it is catching those little crevices in the sculpt here. You can see I purposely got it on the back of his arm here. There's a little ridge on his arm. So I've made sure that I'm catching inside there and it's pooling. It's pooling inside his fingers there. That's the look I want. I don't want to go too thick on the top of his arm, because this is obviously where the light is hitting it in this particular scenario. I don't know if you can see, but I've got it sort of hitting into the crevice of the actual sleeve there. Let's make sure we get that complete. And what looked like a very light base color, now with the wash over the top, is falling back into a more natural color. Stroke it off the top of his finger there. Now I am going to come back through on the fingers, and we're actually going to capture the knuckles and the ridge of his thumb and everything with that first light skin that we had, just to get the highlights. Let's get underneath his arm here. Let that all dry. Alright, and then we'll be fairly liberal on his face. Let it run into the ears let it run into the eyes. Now, one thing about eyes, I was asked about this yesterday. Any tips for the eyes? I would actually more often start with the eyes, or at least get the eyes done before you get too deep with everything else on the figure's head. The reason for that is it's easy to screw up eyes. Eyes then will ruin the rest of the miniature, doesn't matter how well painted it is. And so you might end up repainting them a couple of times, and that's okay. Or touching them up. I tend to paint my eyes fairly a little bit bigger and then cinch them in with flesh. And you'll end up with more of an oval shaped pupil. Don't do a dot of black. It will look like your miniature's staring at you. It almost gets cut off a little bit by the eyelids either side of it. That's more natural. So that's kind of what we'll be doing with this miniature today. It's a little bit harder because he does have glasses on. But and the sculpt around the glasses is really tricky. This miniature literally has glasses and eyelids going on, and it creates a really funny area for the paint to be sitting. But we should be able to do it. Same technique. We'll do a dot of white in here. We'll do a dot of black, and then gonna cinch up both sides with a slightly darker flesh color because that's the eyelid area, especially underneath the eyebrow. And then we'll do a little, we'll do his eyebrows on the top there. If we need to repaint this area a little bit until we get a satisfactory look, we will. I typically don't do the pupils staring face on too harshly. With this one, it won't matter. With the glasses and everything else going on, it's going to be very hard to sort of, get a staring look with this guy because the pupils are going to be quite small. But I've seen a few times that someone will paint a fairly big white dot and a fairly big black dot just staring forward, and you just get this really fake, like someone is like staring into the camera, I think, well, you know what, while we're here, let's get those sneakers done with the red before I forget, and then we'll get the grey hair done. Now for the grey hair, I'm going to wash it with a medium strong tone. Think, like a almost black. And we'll let that dry, and then I'm going to dry brush it with a little bit of grey. We'll let the sneakers sit. We'll finish the sneakers with white laces because the white will contrast really nicely with the red, but also be complementary then, I think, with the white flowers that we're going to do on his shirt. Yeah, let's do his grey hair. Okay, so we'll take this around. Strong tone. So the Army Painter quick shade that I'm using here, they have a strong tone and they have a dark tone. I'm going to use the strong. The dark tone is almost, it is literally black. And I think that would be too much. It will actually make his hair look near black, and I think that's going to be the wrong result. So I'm just going to do, it's not quite grey, but it's a weak black, if that makes any sense. And then when we actually highlight this later on, it will look nice and grey. Now if a little bit of this gets on the shirt, that's okay, but I'm going to be careful. I'm going to try and not. I'm going to be doing some tidy washing here, if that makes any sense. We'll do his beard in the same way. Again, against the grain a little bit, just to try and get that wash to sit in the low-lying areas. And I'm going to take a look at his widow's peak just to make sure we're nice and symmetrical on it. Doesn't really matter what the sculpt has going on here. I want to make sure that it looks about right, and the darker wash is going to help define this shape. Something like that. You can see where it's drying, it's still got a nice little grey quality to it. Let's get his beard done. Now Gary had a like almost a goatee thing going on. I've got a photo reference here. The miniature almost makes it look like he has hair coming up onto his cheeks, and he doesn't. So I'm going to get his beard in here, and then I'm going to touch up those cheeks after we've done his eyes and his mouth with a little bit of flesh colour. Well, I'll do that after his moustache and everything is in place. Alright, we'll let that dry. And then his forehead too. His forehead looks pretty muddy right now. We will be coming through with his cheeks and his forehead and the palm of his hand, and we will be putting a little bit of highlight back on that, and it cleans everything up and will look a lot more natural. But before I do that, I want to actually get his eyes done, because then if we screw up the eyes, and there's a possibility of that, we can tidy them up, we can cinch it up, and then we can paint away from the eyes. I don't want the eyes to be the last thing, because if we screw it up, I've got to then repaint bits that we've already finished. And then his glass frame is actually really small on this miniature, and kind of hooks in underneath the eye a little bit right there as well. We'll do that last. Alright, so let's get his eye done. By the way, one technique for doing eyes is to paint the black first, like almost the pupil, and then do 2 dots of white either side. But that's going to be really down to the miniature that you're using. Like how well sculpted and how large that area is that you've got to work with. Because Gary here has very small eyes, there's actually half of that eye area is eyelids, and then he has the glasses going around it. I'm going to opt for not doing that technique. I'm going to do the white. It'll be almost like a horizontal oval shape that I'm going to be shooting for. And I'm going to be doing a dot of black in the center. And then I'm going to cut off that black and any excess white by painting in flesh and brown above and below. So let's move him to one side. I'm going to get a finer brush for this. It doesn't have to be like a 1 pixel thing though. That's not what we're dealing with. You just want something that has a fairly good tip to it. And I think I'm going to opt for that one. Alright. So white first. Now this is, when I start getting into details, I start actually dabbing the back of my hand a little bit. I wouldn't recommend it. Some paints are toxic. This is why painters wear plastic gloves. Okay, so my apologies for really leaning in on this. Hopefully you can see what I'm doing. This headset thing that I'm wearing, by the way, I found this on Amazon. That's actually looking pretty good. But yeah, these are just $20, and they come with a range of different magnifying strengths, built-in light, optional headband on them. You see them advertised on Facebook, but they're $40 if that route. Oh, that actually came out pretty good first attempt. I'm actually really, really surprised. Okay, so I've got little white eyes on him now. I think you can just about see right there. I'm gonna give that a moment to dry. I want to do his shirt last. I'll probably, what we'll do, and maybe, what I'm gonna do, I'm looking to see if I can actually paint the laces on his shoes, and I might while they're drying. But I'm probably gonna do the DMG, and then we'll do his shirt. We'll make his shirt last, I think. Let's paint some laces, just while his pupils are drying. There we go, and I've got a nice, I like the white on red contrast that has. Okay, so black pupils. And then, like I say, even though the eyes are really small, I'm probably going to take the time to cinch the eyes a little bit with a little stroke of a darker flesh color. Because if you look at someone's eyelids, they're actually a little darker. The eye is sunk, obviously, a little bit onto the face. So it's a little darker because of that. The eyebrow underneath is darker. So I'm not going to go like full on deep brown or anything, but I am going to just cinch it. And plus he's wearing glasses, right? So almost consider it a little bit of a shadow. But let's get the black pupil painted first. And again, I want to point out that this brush is not ridiculously thin. I have much smaller brushes than this, and I very rarely use them. Again, it's really about something that has a good point and holds the paint at the tip versus one bristle. Now the left, or my left, his right eye, clearly, that has gone wrong. But that's no worries, because I'm going to let that black dry. I've got black underneath his eyebrow, and his glasses, and underneath his eye. But that's what I'm talking about when we actually just then tidy it up and cinch it up. That's why we do the eyes first. We'll get a little bit of the flesh color here, I think.
So the order you're painting things, is that the typical order for most miniatures?
Yeah. All right, that's already looking better, but I need to get a dot of white. I mean, I think that looks good, but the perfectionist in me now wants to put a dot of white on his right eye on the outside edge. And then I think that's going to look fine. Pex, I think it really depends on the miniature and the scale that I would be painting at. You know, like I've got a camel cataphractari, right? And I've got the camel, and I've got the rider on it, and you know the rider actually has a full helmet. So obviously the order that I approached that was completely different. But if he had had an open face, yeah, I probably would actually honestly get the base coat in of his entire head, including his base flesh. And then I would do his eyes and start pulling up. It's almost like you're going for the deepest recess and coming out. Because when you come out, you're going to be hitting the more details aspect of it. Whether it be a piece of braid hanging down or the belt around someone's waist. I've already painted the armor before I do the belt 9 times out of 10. So typically, yeah, I'm going kind of for those big areas on the miniature, or the deeper areas on the miniature. And that includes the depth of the eyes, if you think about it, and then I kind of come out from there. And then what's going to be after that? Well, like the shadows around the eyes, spectacles, I guess, if they're wearing anything like that. The highlights then on the cheeks and the brow, then the eyebrows. That would be the typical order that I would approach it in. I'm going to actually put just a little bit of red in this here. Because I'm going to do his mouth. Great. Okay, let's do that dot of white. By the way, Pex, just as a FYI, I'm using the painting book in this. So I've actually been using the painting book quite a bit now. I think I'm in a position to be able to do a review on this, an honest review. Pros and cons.
That'd be interesting.
Something a little bit more informative than just, hey, it's a painting book.
Mm.
Alright, I want to get this. And you know what part of the problem is with this? I think we need a little bit of flesh. A little bit of brown. I'm painting underneath his glasses right now. That's not looking too bad. I think I need another dot of white. I'm going to do his eyebrows though while we're here. This wiping on my finger, by the way, I watched a professional painter do that. And what I find is it not only is taking off the excess paint, but you're shaping the tip for what you're about to do. Gary, you are taking shape, my son. You are taking shape. Yeah, I think his eyes are fine. Okay, so I'm going to do his eyeglasses next. And then we'll do the highlights and get his cheeks in place and things like that. Yeah, I think that's going to be the order of things. We're getting pretty close with him. Time check. We're literally 1 hour in. And I think we're about to start working on some of the details of Mr. Gygax here. Go. Okay, so a little bit of refreshment. Yeah, and I've got to get the white pages on the book too, but I think I'm going to finish his head before we move anywhere else. So let's stay focused. So,
What's that?
You're muted, right?
I'm going to use for this right here. There's obviously a lot of paint manufacturers out there. And one of the questions I get asked a lot is, what paints are you using? And I have a full selection from Army Painter, Reaper, Games Workshop, you name it. But one of the best metals I've ever found have actually been these. These are golden fluid acrylics. I'm going to use an iridescent silver. But I love their copper as well. Like the copper washed with black creates an incredible bronze type look. These just have this wonderful sheen to them, this wonderful shine. The pigment in them is really on point. So that's what I'm going to be using today. They are my metal of choice. And I can just dab right off there, I think, for this. Now, Gary has very fine glasses. I don't want to go too crazy with this. But I also don't want to ignore his glasses. So, let's just make sure we don't have excess paint there. Now, when we give this away, what I'm going to do is I'm going to finish the miniature. I'll spray him with a matte varnish to make sure that he, can be handled safely. And I'm going to actually snip off the metal base that he's on. And I'm going to pin him to a more decorative base. And that's what we'll be using. But I'll do all of that off camera. And you will note that we've only used 2 brushes in this entire thing. There we go. I actually looked at a picture of Gary, a photo reference, and his glasses or glass frame was indeed more towards a silver spectrum. So trying to capture that today. Now here the sculpt gets a little bit weird because his glasses start to almost like merge into his face. I want to be very careful I don't start making this odd. While still capturing the shape of the glasses themselves. It's like they almost merge into the cheeks. I did the sides of the glasses first. And I want to be very careful that I don't get too... Yeah, I think I'm going to leave it like that. So the actual sculpt kind of sort of takes the bottom of the glasses and almost like leads them into the eye, and it looks really weird if you paint it that way. So I'm going to leave it like this with the top. Obviously, I've got the arms, I've got the top, and I've got the sides. And then it's more like those glasses that don't have a bottom frame on them. If I paint it, it's going to look like he's wearing goggles. So I think this is going to be close enough. Let me sort of hit the little sort of autofocus button right here. But I think that's going to be close enough for this. We get the insinuation of the actual glasses on there. I still have his eyes shown, which is nice. So now I think we can actually move on. So let's just close that down. I'm going to go back now to the flesh. And we go. Now my intent here is I'm going to pick up the nose. If you, I'm a little bit low to sort of start talking about, you know, anatomy of people and things like that, and like studying human form. We're painting a 28mm miniature here, but what I will say is that if you look at the human face in like some natural lighting, the ridge of the nose is a little bit lighter. It's catching whatever light source you've got. Your cheeks are typically a little bit lighter. So I'm capturing these now, but I'm also using this as an opportunity where if we've got beard that is covering too much, that we can clean that up a little bit. So I'm hitting his cheeks. They're already looking a lot more natural. I'm going to leave his mouth as is. I'm going to hit his forehead. Yeah, I think that he's looking pretty good. I'm gonna actually, just for giggles, let's capture the tip of his ears and his earlobes, just to better define them. And this will be a great opportunity now to do the tops of his arms that would be capturing the light, like his thumb right there, top of his finger. I'm not going to get too down the side with this. We're going to let the natural sort of lighting kick in on that. And then like here, and of course he's got his palm facing upwards, so let's just something like that. Now here, we're going to do his thumb, because it's on the top. He's got his forearm exposed right there, so we'll capture a little bit right on the top there. And a little bit of this finger. And I think that should do it. Now, if we want to be purist, what we would do is we would actually put a little dot on each knuckle, because the knuckles tend to be a little bit lighter. Yeah, and I think that looks pretty okay. I think that's on point. I'm going to dry brush his hair now, because then that is going to be Gary's head done, and his arms are done. Then that really just leaves the DMG and his shirt. And we'll do his shirt last. Okay. Got a couple of other people that have dropped in, by the way. Got a Brian joining us right now. I think we're about an hour away from finishing him, by the way. Maybe just 45 minutes, just to give you an idea. We're really close. Dry brush the hair. So I'm going to use the grey that we started with. And I'm actually, so for dry brushing, I actually have some special dry brushes. But when it's this small, you just need an older brush. I'm not going to use my nice brushes for this. Because dry brushing is an act of literally just, first you get paint on your brush. Then you like get as much of it off as you can. So it's almost completely dry. And then you literally sort of do this type of action. So you're capturing that the little bit of dry paint that you've got on catches just the highlights alone. That act of doing this is pretty abusive with brushes, right? You don't want to do your nice brushes for that. So I actually keep my old brushes for this type of thing. Like old brushes for glopping something on, old brushes for dry brushing. But you can also get like these flat brushes, and I've actually got a flat brush here, which is an old flat brush. So I'm actually going to use this for, and it's literally a sable shader. I'm going to use this for my dry brushing action. Let's put him to one side here. And I'm going to get a little bit of grey. And I'm going to wipe it off, which seems weird. But I want it to be virtually dry. And not at all like runny and watery. And then I'm just going to stroke over his hair against the flow of the hair. Because I want to leave, I don't want the brushes to actually, the bristles to fall into the cracks. I want like the to go across the hair. And because it's not wet, it's not going to run into the gap. It will just skim on top of where the actual hair shape is. Now, on larger miniatures, you could totally do this technique, but on larger miniatures, human hair doesn't quite work that way, doesn't shine that way, so you would change your technique. But for something like 28mm, this is a perfectly good approach. And I think, for sure, Gary here would be happy with it. So this is kind of where we're netting out right now. Hope everyone can sort of see that. See if we can get a little bit of focus. So his jeans are done. I consider his sneakers to be done. His face is done at this point. I'm okay with his face. I might want to dry brush his beard a little bit, but yeah, maybe. But his face is looking pretty good. His hair is looking good. Obviously, now we need his Hawaiian shirt and that DMG. So that's where we're going to start. But I am going to just get a little bit of grey on his beard. Just a little bit. Otherwise I'll completely forget. So let's... And his moustache, maybe just a little bit. Okay. Okay, that will do it. Okay, cool. DMG. Now, I happen to have a little reference here. I painted the DMG now a couple of times, but I'm gonna bring this up just so everyone has a visual reference for what I'm working against. I'm gonna do that. I'm also gonna paint the back of the book. But the thing about this is the back of the DMG, I'm sure some of you actually have it. There's a white circle with text in it in the center, and then you've got the City of Brass at the top, and you've kind of got almost these catacombs underneath, and it's kind of like I think it's a ship or something to the left, if memory recalls, and there's some kind of big lizard in the caves at the bottom. But Gary has his arm over most of that, so I remember enough to paint what we're going to be able to see, and the white blob is going to be the first thing that I'm actually going to do here. And then we're going to do the front. Now, some people use decals for this, and that is absolutely fine. There is nothing wrong with that at all. But you're not going to be able to get a decal on the back of the book, so I'm just going to make this consistently us painting it today. Doing the painted approach. Someone pointed out in yesterday's stream that the pages should be gold, but that was in the reprints that they did more recently. Yeah, that's got a nice little sort of page effect to it, I think. Let's just do underneath, and then we'll do the front. My apologies if this holder is just blocking your view a little bit. I'm trying to angle things so you can see what's going on as best I can. Yeah, that looks good. Okay, so the main thing about the book, painting the book, is I don't need to capture every single detail there. Absolutely single bristle width perfect. It's like we don't need to write the words Dungeon Master's Guide on the front of this thing, because at this size you're just not going to see it. But what we do need to do is get the right colours and general shapes in the right positions, and it will look like the right DMG. And what I mean by that is there is, for example, and you might not have even thought about it before, a somewhat iconic strip of yellow in that corner. Now, we're not going to write the words, you know, Advanced Dungeons and Dragons onto that. We don't need to. We have the strip in place. That is the right thing to do. Additionally, we have at the top, we have the title, right? And the title we can capture like so. And then, of course, we have that big, huge devil type guy right there. And I'm going to start with him. He's our main focus. Give him his head. And we will come through, by the way, and we will paint his eyes and his horns. Because that's what we do, right? That's what we do. But let's just get his basic body and shape in place. Give him his shoulders coming out like so. He's got a body then that's coming down. We'll be adding some highlights to this to pick out facial features and his abs and stuff. He's got now a leg that comes down not quite to the bottom, right? So let's give him the leg here. And he's got like a beginning of another leg here, but it kind of gets lost then in the black. And then his arms kind of come down like this to about here, and we'll do his hand there. This is a fairly thin red paint that I'm using, by the way, on the small brush that we started using earlier. It's not the tiniest of brushes in the world, but I'm really just using the very, very, very tip of it, and I'm almost building it up, you could say almost pixel by pixel by pixel, versus trying to draw it in a very conventional sense. Dot it, bring it up with dots. Okay, so what I want to point out here is I'm looking at the cover of the Dungeon Master's Guide, and I'm looking for the main colors and their position and general shape and how they are arranged on this very small black canvas. But you can see as we're doing that, we're replicating it. We're not trying to literally match it line by line by line. We're trying to match it almost color and size. And that's it. So that sword that he's got there, I see as white, as close as down it. And across his body now, and across the leg that we just drew, and across the hand that we just drew, I'm also seeing that there is a white shield that is very prominent, and then kind of like a shadowy figure, but the white shield is necessary. That's part of the structure of the page. And then we have this blue, almost a dark blue, that's sitting next to him, or standing next to him. And so we're going to get that too. And then we have this pinkish like shape clutched in the demon's hand. So we're going to get that too. So these are the main shapes and colors that my eye is seeing on the page right now. That's what we want to replicate. So let's start with the white shield. White shield is fairly near the bottom. It kind of is one of the main things that cuts off the demon's leg. We'll leave it like that for now. And then I'm actually going to shift to the little pale waif of a form. Young lady there. And for her, she's kind of got like this leg going across over here. She kind of falls into his hand. And then she's kind of like out the other side. She kind of got a little arm. Coming up. And there's one further down here. Something like this. Now I know she's got some like golden hair there. But I think we could just do a dot up that. There we go. That's kind of got her in his clutches. I'm going to shift to a blue. Now, it's a fairly dark blue on the cover. I'm going to do a little lighter because there's so little colour going, so little pigment going onto the book cover that it's actually going to get lost very easily. So I'm just going to for now, we got this. He's kind of holding up his little sleeve. He's kind of here like this. And he's kind of like got another arm. Coming down like that. Got his big sleeve going on. Hopefully you guys can see this. Hopefully the focus is okay on it. And then he's got a little bit of hands sticking out here. And of course he does have a head, so we'll just give him a head. There. Now, the knight that's next to him, the knight is almost completely hidden, right? There's like an insinuation of his helmet. And I think I'm going to capture this with white. And it's more of there's a sword kind of like, you know, going across here. And we've got like someone's head is right here. But the rest of it kind of falls into shadow a little bit, so I'm not going to try and capture him too much beyond that, which I actually think looks pretty good. Then we've got the demon himself has horns. That will do it nicely. And he has two little beady eyes. Really beady, but I want to get them on here. Oh yeah, he looks good. That looks good. Let me see if I can focus in on that for you. I think that looks pretty good. I'm happy with how that one's turned out. Quite a bit. Now the demon also has his own sword, and the sword is kind of coming across his body and up that arm there, and it doesn't quite join his hand. You see how that falls into blackness? But I'm gonna actually just bring it across, and it comes up to his shoulder above the woman, so like this, and it's got a little bit of thickness to it. And I think that's it there. I think that's perfect. We don't need to mess around with that anymore. I am actually really happy with how that cover came out. That might be one of my best yet. That's awesome. I'm happy with that. Alright, we're going to do the back of the book, then we're going to do the Hawaiian shirt. The Hawaiian shirt won't take as long as you think it's going to. We're currently at only 1.5 hours into this. I think in half an hour more, we'll be done. We can do a quick Q&A if you have any questions. And of course, feel free to ask them as we're doing this. But then in about half an hour time, I think we can actually do our drawing. For the drawing, I will bring up our participant chat. We'll assign everyone a number. It will literally just go down from like 1 to 6 or however many people we have in here right now. I will bring up a dice roller online. We'll do 1d6 and we'll count it out. And that person wins. I will need a shipping address. And what I'll be doing is I'll take Gary. I'll snip off his base. I'll pin him to a more appropriate fun base. I'll make sure he's fully varnished up so he's safe for handling. I will give you an email address where you can contact me for just giving me your mailing address, and we can get this shipped off, and I'll probably ship it in the next week. Okay, so City of Brass. It's a little bit more orange on the book. If you have a copy, you can see it's like yellow, orangey, golden City of Brass rooftops. So, and spires and the like. So Gary is covering most of this, but I think we could still capture the spirit of it. And then there's like this underground area right here. In fact, let's just And there's some little pillars on the right. Kind of opens up then over here. I think it's actually like there's some water or something over there. And there's actually, I think there's like a big huge lizard or something. And then there, a green lizard. So let's get a spot of green. And spot of blue. Okay. DMG is done. I don't know if you can see that well, but I think that came out looking pretty good. I'm really quite happy with that. So let's do his Hawaiian shirt. Now, Gary obviously wore, and he's known for his Hawaiian shirts. I do have a picture of Gary in a Hawaiian shirt, but it's a very dark blue with green, yellow leaves on it. And that's what I've typically painted when doing this miniature. I have never done a red one before. So today we're actually going to do red instead. Red with white flowers. So that will make this one, at least for my painting, very, very, very unique. This is a one-off right here. And what I'm going to do is collections of leaves like this. And we're going to fill his shirts with this type of design. I don't mind a little bit of the red bleeding through, by the way. It's almost becomes part of the leaf pattern. And then we're gonna do stalks. But I want to get the leaves on first. And I'm trying where possible to use just the tip of this brush. If you press down too heavily, it will start to get the main body of the brush and you'll start getting too much paint getting transferred. This is taking shape. We do have some other design details that we'll be adding to this. Okay, just a few more flowers, I think. Okay, just a little more. Okay. I can actually hide that now. We don't need that. So right now I'm just kind of filling this in a little bit more of a design. Yeah, I'm happy with how this is turning out. I don't want like the leaves to look like islands in a sea of red. So I'm kind of just breaking it up then with like little stalks and the likes. I've seen it on not only his shirts, but this type of design in general. So I felt like it would be appropriate here. I I think this is kind of done. I think like we're into a situation now where less is more, you know? I think this is coming out as a nice shirt though. I gotta be honest with you. Hopefully you like. A couple more dots and I think we will be done. I've actually beat my record. This has only taken me 1 hour 40 minutes.
Must go faster. Must go faster.
Right? I honestly thought this was going to be like a speed painting thing. I was really, really, really nervous. But I think he's done. I think he's ready. I think Gary Gygax is finished. Alright, so let's put him right here. Let's prop him up a little bit. And let's do a little bit of autofocus, see if we can bring him in. Maybe not. Okay, so this is where we're going to do the giveaway. Let me turn off my headlight here. We're going to do a giveaway on this. We have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 people in chat with us right now, excluding myself. So I'm going to actually bring over the list of everyone. We have Brian, Doug, Jonathan, Nick, and Obsidian Risk Scott. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna do a D5. I'm gonna bring up Google. I'm gonna type in 1D5, and it's gonna give us a result, and we're gonna count it down. That person wins this miniature. What I will need is to actually have, you will need to give me a shipping address. So I am going to, in chat right now. Oh, thank you. By the way, I didn't have chat open. My apologies for that. Thank you, Brian, for the compliments on the DMG. It's really appreciated. So I'm going to type in my email address here. This is my personal email address. If you win, go to chat, grab my email, contact me, give me your personal shipping address, or a shipping address. If you can't email me, or you miss the email, you can find me online on Facebook, just Alyssa Faden. In fact, if you type in Alyssa Faden, it's Alyssa Faden on Instagram, it's Alyssa Faden on Facebook. You're going to be able to find me there. Also on Twitter, okay? So just get hold of me, and we will get this little guy shipped to you. I'm really happy with this result. He is unique. He is different than any other paint job I've done on him before. And I think the DMG is my best DMG I've ever done. So, best of luck to everyone. Let's bring open the dice roller. And we'll do 1d5. And let's see what happens here. Roll the dice. 4. 4 is Brian, Doug, Jonathan, Nick. Nick Pagano, you are the winner, my friend. You are the winner. So, Nick, contact me that email address at your convenience. This guy is yours. Congratulations. I'm psyched for you, my friend. That's fantastic. Well done. Well done. So, everyone, if you have any questions, let me know. You can type them in the chat or just use voicemail. Voicemail. Listen to me. Or use voice. Let me know if you got any questions. Otherwise, we're done. It was done a lot quicker than the 3 hours I was expecting. But we can do a 5-minute sort of hangout here. And I'll get this guy ready for Nick. So if there are no questions, I hope that your GaryCon goes really, really well for all of you. I hope you have an absolute blast. I'm going to be back tonight on There Is Room at the Table for Everyone, Diversity Discussion Panel. I will also be back at 10 o'clock Pacific Time tomorrow morning, noon Central Time, with Luke Gygax, Ernie Gygax, and Stephen Chenault from Trollord Games, and we're going to be talking about the history of Gaxmore, and I did the map for it. So hopefully our paths will cross again. Nick, again, absolute congratulations on the win for this one. I'm going to be making that official on the GaryCon forum with a photo of this little guy. Everyone have a great time. Thanks for hanging out with me today. Truly, love you all. I'll see you in the next event somewhere. All right. See you, everyone. Thanks again for hanging out.